Thank you. My name is Naveen Verma. I am graduate of IIT Kanpur 1999 batch. Before I introduce my next panel, I'll say something that you can relate all. You just have to say hi here. IIT ka tempo? Hi. Yes. So those who were paying attention to what Vinod Khosla was talking in the morning, one of the 11 predictions he had was to do with carbon is a solvable problem. Well, guess what? We have a very exciting panel. These are all industry experts talking about the hydrogen. Could potentially hydrogen be that solution? I do not know. I'm eager to learn. Suppose you are as well. So I'll first introduce our esteemed moderator, Dr. Sunita Satyapal. Dr. Satyapal is the director for US Department of Energy's Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Technologies Office. So you can't get better than that. She oversees more than 1.6 billion in hydrogen and fuel cell activities. She coordinates budget of roughly $10 billion in hydrogen activities across DOE and serves a lead role in developing the US National Clean Hydrogen Strategy. She has more than 2.5 decades of experience across industry and government, from the research to business development, so she understands both sides, and has served as chair or vice chair for various international hydrogen initiatives across more than 20 countries. Dr. Satyapal received her PhD from Columbia University and did postdoctoral work at Cornell University. She has numerous publications, including in Scientific American, 10 patents, and various recognitions, including a meritorious presidential rank award under President Obama and a distinguished presidential rank award under President Biden, the highest recognition for career senior executive service members in the government. Please give a huge applause to Dr. Satyapal.
Thank you so much, and it's really an honor to be here, even though I did not go to IIT. But first and foremost, let me welcome our really distinguished panelists to come up on the stage, and I don't have long bios for them, but you'll hear a lot more from them. So first of all, Frank Wolak, the president and CEO of essentially the National Trade Association for all of hydrogen and fuel cell technologies, US, over 100 members. Then I'll call Sanjay Shrestha, who is the chief strategy officer for Plug Power, which is one of the leading global companies for electrolyzers and fuel cells. So you'll hear a lot more really exciting work. So a round of applause for Sanjay coming up. He just made it in time. And then Kareem Afzal, who is the executive chairman. You'll hear lots of exciting news about his company, which started small, in fact, an Indian immigrant as his father, and now a global footprint, hydrogen infrastructure. So a huge round of applause for Kareem, the executive chairman of PDC. And then Nolty, Theriot, the senior vice president, Government Affairs, and lots of questions I've been getting on the joint US-India partnership. So you'll hear a lot more about the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. So a huge round of applause for Nolty, who leads that effort. So what I'd like to do first is just set the stage for about 5 minutes, and then we'll go straight to each of the esteemed panelists. And I wanted to also thank Richard D'Souza and TK Mukherjee for actually the idea of having a hydrogen session and for the invitation here. But first, yes, a big thank you. And first, I just want to ask on a scale of 1 to 10, so 10 being very familiar with hydrogen and fuel cells, how many, if you can raise your hands, or let's say a 6 or higher? Okay, so maybe about 20, 30%. That's great. How many of you got to see the fuel cell car that we had downstairs at lunch? So it'll be here, great. And if it'll be here for a little bit longer right after the session, so feel free to come. But basically, I'm going to start with the data, since everyone here is very data-driven. So again, as a reminder, again, big picture here, NASA data, the last 8 years, this is the data, but we don't have 2023 yet on this chart, and that basically, broke the record even more. So last 9 years, hottest year on record, and every decade, as you can see in the orange, of the last 4 decades have been hotter than the one preceding it. So again, just the first big message, the sense of urgency, climate, as well as energy security, resiliency, economic situation. I mean, this is a huge challenge, right, for all of us, the challenge of a lifetime. So question is, why hydrogen? And as many of you know, there's versatility. So very often people talk about hydrogen as the Swiss Army knife of clean energy. The fact that you can produce it from diverse domestic resources, renewables, fossil, nuclear, and then you can use it for multiple applications as a fuel, as a feedstock. It's a carbon-free molecule, and most countries recognize to meet their climate goals, a molecule, it can't only be electrification, carbon-free molecule or its derivative is going to be needed. And then it's also an enabler. So for example, renewables, intermittent renewables like solar and wind, you can produce hydrogen, store it, again, use it for multiple applications. And basically, if you look at what's happening worldwide, it's trillions of dollars in terms of the market opportunity, millions of jobs globally. This is just one snapshot from the Hydrogen Council, hot off the press, 50% growth in projects in just 6 months. So 1,500 projects worldwide, and these are the large projects. They don't include less than a megawatt. So again, really, really exciting time. And what I wanted to ask is, how many of you can raise your hands, have heard about the U.S. National Hydrogen Strategy that the White House released? Okay, most people are not aware. So again, cutting edge information. We released, and it's not just our strategy, it's all of ours. So your strategy as well, our collective strategy of national goal of 10 million metric tons of clean hydrogen by 2030, and then double that by 2040, and then 5 times that. You can see as the market expands what the different end uses may be. Still quite a bit of uncertainty there, but 5 times more hydrogen just in the US. And if we could get to that goal, hydrogen would contribute about 10% of our total emissions reduction. As a reminder of course, the administration, we have a goal of net zero by 2050. So 10% is a huge potential contribution for hydrogen. And globally, over 50 countries have strategies, India as well, and you can see estimates of 10 to even 20% as a result of clean hydrogen. So huge, huge opportunity there. And then hopefully all of you saw, we just announced, President Biden, $7 billion for 7 hydrogen hubs across the country. So again, for the first time in history, I've been in this space for more than 2.5 to almost 3 decades now, government, industry, and this is such a historic time where it's really happening across sectors. So really, really exciting. And so finally, we'll end in terms of the panel discussion about talking about bilateral partnership. And so as I think most of you know, when Prime Minister Modi came to visit the US and President Biden, the 2 largest democracies in the world reaffirmed their partnership, climate, energy leaders, front and center, and hydrogen is one of several topics that were very specifically agreed to in terms of partnerships. So we'll hear at the end how we're doing more on that front. So with that as a high-level introduction, we will go straight to the panelists, and I'll ask each of them to say a little bit about their organization, what's really exciting, and then we'll go through the round of Q&A. So we will start with Frank Wolak to tell us a little bit about FGIA.
Okay. Well, FCHEA, as Sunita said, we are the National Industry Association in the United States for Hydrogen and Fuel Cells. We have been in origin since late 80s and have been advocating for nearly 35 years for policies that advance hydrogen and fuel cell technologies. We have over 100 members, and that spans the entire diversity of supply, production, distribution, users, automakers, heavy-duty vehicle manufacturers, industrial gas companies, utilities. So anyone who is in the space is represented by our membership. We are an organization that here is based in Washington, D.C., advocating for policies, but as Sunita pointed out, the footprint of hydrogen has moved across the United States. We view ourselves as being continental. We work with local organizations when there are policy items that may come up regionally. So we are based here in Washington, but have a lens that looks across the United States. Similarly, the policies that the U.S. has put in place have launched the U.S. from a hydrogen standpoint into the forefront of the international discussion. And many of our members are multinational, so a lot of our goals and activities, aren't international, but they have to look internationally. Part of the reason for being here is there's so much potential that may go on between U.S. companies and Indian companies that the dialogues and conversations need to start early and be continuous. And so with that, I'll turn it back to Sunita.
Great, so thanks, Frank. And so the next speaker we'll hear from is Sanjay, and so especially with plug power, electrolyzers, fuel cells, turn over to you.
Again, thank you, Sunita, and thank you for the invitation. And what a great event that IIT is putting together here. So great to be here. Again, Plug, in a nutshell, what Plug Power is we're trying to build a global, green hydrogen ecosystem. We want to be the solutions provider for that. So what exactly does that mean when we say that? Right, so we've been around for about 2 decades as a company, and we have got the highest number of fuel cell system out in the field, more than 60,000 fuel cell system. And we really run our business now within 2 distinct segments, application and energy business. Within our application business, we actually have fuel cell solution going after material handling market, stationary power market, and even the mobility market. And as Sunita talked about it, hydrogen really is that Swiss knife, if you would, of addressing many hard to abate, type of industries. And by going after some of these markets, we take a lot of pride in the fact that we created, obviously DOE was very instrumental in some of this work and support for the company, the first viable market for hydrogen fuel cell serving customers like Amazon, Walmart, Home Depot with the highest number of the fuel cell system in the field. We've run these systems now for over 1 billion hours. We're now the world's largest user of liquid hydrogen, consuming more than 3 times than what NASA does from the liquid hydrogen annual consumption perspective. So that's our application business that actually drives a lot of demand for hydrogen. And on the energy side today, we are the only company in the world that has got bigger than 1 gigawatt scale of electrolyzer manufacturing. We got to that run rate sometime by the end of Q1 of last year. We now have the liquefaction technology that helps liquefy that gaseous hydrogen coming out of the electrolyzer, and we have one of the best energy efficient liquefier in the market, providing that to many customers like Fortescue, TC Energy, a lot of big players. And we also now actually have within that energy product portfolio, hydrogen trailers on the road, on-site storage of hydrogen. So when you think about our energy product portfolio, we have really established ourselves as a one-stop shop. Anybody who wants to buy product to either produce hydrogen, liquefy hydrogen, move that hydrogen, you can just call Plug and we'll give you that turnkey solution. And on top of all that, to supplement that effort, we're also building the green hydrogen plant here in the US, as well as in Europe. And another thing that I'm actually really proud to actually share with you all here is we're actually about to get 5 megawatt electrolyzer commissioned with NTPC in India this quarter. And we have second project happening with another major oil and gas company there. And we have about 150 folks working on lots of different initiatives, electrolyzer, liquefier, broader energy effort in our office out of Pune. So with that, let me turn it back to you, Sunita.
Great, so thank you. And so now you've heard about the hydrogen production, electrolyzers, fuel cells, and infrastructures really critical components. And so we're really great. And by the way, during the lunch, a lot of people were asking me about what about the hydrogen stations fueling? So it's great that we have the executive chairman here from PDC. So turn it over to you, Kareem.
Great, really thank you, Sunita, and thanks to the organizers here for having me here today. I'm proud to say that I am a brother-in-law of an IIT Madras graduate. My father did not go to IIT. He went to Osmania Engineering College. He got a scholarship to come here in 1965. He met my Swedish mom, didn't go back. Story of PDC is he started his business in his garage as a high-pressure consulting company, and that eventually became a high-pressure compression company. In 1983, we sold our first compressor, grew it slowly over time. And then in the late 90s, we started to make compressors for the mobility sector, where we deployed diaphragm compression for Sunline transit into a bus filling application out in California. Fast forward today, we have 6 offices around the world, including Germany, China, Korea, Japan, Brisbane, Australia, and Johannesburg, where we are deploying our compression equipment and also our small-scale refueling solution to fill material handling equipment, to fill light-duty vehicles and cars, buses, trucks, drones, mining equipment. PDC provided the compression equipment to the world's first mining haulers in South Africa through Plug.
Working together. Yep.
Really a great opportunity and great project down in South Africa. We were a winner with our partners IVIS Energy Solutions of the DOE H-Prize contest, which challenged American innovators to come up with small-scale refueling solutions that include on-site generation, so you can just connect electricity and water, and you can produce clean hydrogen fuel that in turn can fill a number of different things. And our early deployments for this product, which we call Simple Fuel with our partner IVIS, has been deployed at about 12 sites in Japan, where we're filling forklifts and light-duty vehicles in factories as part of the virtuous cycle in making hydrogen fuel cell cars, and also the forklifts. We have 2 new installations in Australia. We are looking to deploy one in South Africa and different parts of the world. There's really no part of the globe that have not really been in touch with except Antarctica, maybe coming soon. And hydrogen mobility is really excellent where you need to fill something quite quickly, where you're moving heavy things, and you want to truly tie into curtailed renewables in order to balance your loads. So really excited to talk about it, and thank you for having me.
Great, thank you, Kareem. So I think we've seen, again, the production, delivery, storage, and so we thought we would end with the discussion really of the US-India partnership, because that's, I think, what's also unique about this conference. And USISPF, which has been front and center in so many different ways, so we're really lucky to have Nolty, so who will tell us a little bit about the partnership and next steps.
Thank you, Sunita. It's a pleasure to be here. USISPF is one of the largest business trade organizations representing U.S. companies expanding and operating in India, and also some of the big Indian companies working in the U.S., everyone from GE to Gale. And our mission is to advocate for policies that strengthen the U.S.-India strategic partnership. And we do that by providing a platform for our member companies and government stakeholders through roundtables, conferences, trade missions, reverse trade missions. A good example of our work in the hydrogen space, next month we'll be partnering with the U.S. Trade Development Agency to bring a big reverse trade mission comprised of some of the leading Indian companies, both PSUs, private sector, companies like Gale, ONGC, and others, to showcase U.S. technology, build partnerships, and work on policy regulatory issues. In addition to that, we serve as the U.S.-India Hydrogen Task Force Secretariat, and I'll touch on that a little bit later during the question and answer period. So once again, it's a pleasure to be here, and look forward to the panel.
Great. So I'll go ahead and start with a few questions, and if folks want to submit questions online, we'll go straight there. We have about 23 minutes. And so I'll start with Frank. Basically, given that your organization has been, the main trade association representing industry, over 100 members, again, for decades now in the US, we had fuel cells, hydrogen, they merged. Over 100 partners, global companies too, but again, the leading national trade association. What are areas that you think are most exciting for you in terms of the trade association perspective? And then also another question we get a lot is, what about financing and deployment? Are there any Obviously, there are challenges there. Are there innovations, other approaches? So kind of big picture, what do you think, especially because you've been in this field for so many years as well, like me, from the industry perspective, and now again in charge of the entire trade association. What do you think is like really exciting for the audience to hear?
Well, let me obviously those are two questions. Let me take the first one about the excitement. I think there are maybe two areas. One is the diversity of participants. It is amazing to see the number of players that are coming into this space, not just the companies that are involved in fuel cell technology or electrolyzers or automakers, but those companies looking to be participants, derivative fuels, production of ammonia, production of sustainable aviation fuels, production of electricity using ammonia derived from hydrogen. So it's just a very interesting time where people see the challenge of decarbonization, they see the value of hydrogen, and more entities are beginning to kind of explore this space. I think that's one thing. The other thing I'll bring up here is that I sense that we are now in the age of the application. For the first 20 years or so the past 20 years of this industry, people have worked quietly with refining, doing R&D, refining fuel cell technology, refining electrolyzers, making the nth level of system and going from alpha to beta to production. And we find ourselves now at a place where so much of the technology is ready for deployment and scale. There's still research that has to go on. There's going to be a vast amount of innovation. But the core technologies that will drive the hydrogen economy and drive hydrogen applications are really proven, kind of ready to be put into that application mode. And that's just not in like a fuel cell in a vehicle or an electrolyzer at play, but actually to be part of the larger energy ecosystem where hydrogen gets produced from electrons from the grid, where there's distribution of hydrogen, there's use of hydrogen in other co-products. Those kinds of infrastructure intersections are also part of that new exciting place. As far as the other question, Sunita, about scale and deployment and financing, let me think here that the financing and deployment that we are seeing will first start out. I think demand is kind of where I'm taking this. The deployment of hydrogen is going to first start by looking at the reduction in gray hydrogen around the world, new advances in green hydrogen replacing the gray hydrogen that's been produced. You'll also see incremental kind of transactions where people will produce supply of hydrogen to be delivered to a facility or delivered to make ammonia. The third and the real challenging place is when you get to somewhat of a seamless market where there's buyers and sellers, there's producers, there's markets, and that's where you see the diversity. And I think a lot of the effort needs to be placed on demand growth. So as far as innovation and getting transactions financed, I think you will need to see innovative approaches that might involve governments going beyond grants and tax credits into sort of stimulating bulk purchases, stimulating ways in which large volumes of commodities get purchased. I think the idea of de-risking project activities and where do policymakers and government play so that financiers don't just have to look to getting an offtake to make their debt work. And so I think you're going to have to see some innovation in a lot of the softer areas of energy and hydrogen in order to kind of move from that gray hydrogen to incremental projects into a seamless marketplace.
Great, thank you. And also for those who maybe have not heard, we on the government side launched an initiative of up to $1 billion to help incentivize the offtake. So again, we produce a lot of hydrogen, but again, we need to have that certainty. So that's just one example, hopefully coming up. And so I guess Sanjay, one question, and I already have one from the audience, at least one from the audience, so we'll go quickly here. But Plug Power, as you explained, has done a lot, and I showed at lunchtime the mock fuel cell, if anyone hadn't seen it. So we've been funding this for decades now. Again, this size, just to give you an idea, the power density increased so much, it's enough to power a light bulb. So again, in the car, it's a stack maybe about this large. Again, hundreds of megawatt scale. Yep. So lots of innovation already, and companies now that have thousands of commercial systems. And you mentioned again, you're looking at more like vertical integration. Talked about again, the reverse is the electrolyzer. So water, electricity, produce hydrogen and oxygen, and then, or a fuel cell. And so you're also basically kind of not only providing the fuel cells for forklifts and other applications, but also the hydrogen. So here too, kind of what do you think is kind of the most exciting space? But also if you want to touch on what are some of the differences from the US versus the India market?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. Maybe I can take the US versus the India market for a second, right?
Okay.
I mean, one of the things that's really starting to change in the US here is, I mean, Frank, your point is very well noted, right? Where's the demand going to come from, right? It was always Plug would get a call, hey, do you guys want to be the off-taker for the hydrogen, either for your material handling industry or for some of the other markets that you guys are looking at. But that narrative is starting to change a bit. Okay, and the reason why that narrative is starting to change a bit is for a couple of reasons. Number one, as you pointed out, we're starting to talk about going and displacing gray hydrogen with green hydrogen. That's a very substantial market, right? Whether you're talking about refining industry, you're talking about ammonia industry, and that's where it's not only that it's a massive demand, you also have a financing structure already in place where you can envision that 15 to 20 year offtake where somebody can think about sizing their debt and equity appropriately. You have an off-taker that's very bankable, right? That's an area where you're really starting to see activities happening. And then another area that I think is creating a tremendous amount of demand, and whether it's a 24 or a 25 event, but it's going to happen and happen very meaningfully in this decade, is coming from our stationary product, where 1 megawatt stationary product now consumes 1.4 tons of hydrogen per day running 24/7 when you have one forklift consuming 1 kilogram of hydrogen, right? If you would, running that 24/7. Just think about the magnitude of scale of how the demand gets created. Now, obviously the policy backdrop and, from the PTC guidance standpoint in the US, the initial draft is not exactly what we had hoped for, but we're hopeful things gets better here, during this review period and all that. But then when we think about India, the way we look at it is we see India becoming a big demand pull of a market as well. We're actually tracking, and some of you probably know this better than I do, but they are talking about somewhere around 7 to 8 million tons of hydrogen demand coming from that market. But if I extrapolate that and how many of those projects really get to FID, final investment decision, based on the history here, looking at the US market or the Western market, even if it's 10%, it's pretty real. Right? But for us, the opportunity is not just the demand driver from the Indian market perspective. We see this as an opportunity where we can actually have tremendous talent pool. Could this become a fabrication opportunity and a hub for us to support some of the opportunity in the whole Southeast Asian market? So the way we look at it, I think US is obviously probably a bit ahead of the game, if you would, but I think, whether it's from a demand standpoint, being able to access talent, being able to actually do even some of the local manufacturing and really help the whole cross-border opportunity, I think remains very, very tremendous between India and the US.
Great, and I know did speak with some of you who are really interested kind of on the investment side, maybe even a show of hands of how many are interested in more kind of the investing, financing. Great.
I can take those questions.
Yeah, we can take all that. We can all meet afterwards. And so again, just from the DOE perspective alone, we have like over 1,300 issued patents as a result of our funding over the decades, about 30 commercial technologies, another 65 that we think could be commercial in the next few years. So again, opportunity for early stage kind of investment, VC type, but then also the later stage, deployment, financing. So lots and lots of opportunity there. And so again, we talked about the production side, a little bit on offtake, infrastructure, again, that middle piece is critical. And so I thought maybe Kareem, since you have compressors, you have a lot of experience in kind of that midstream space, if you want to talk a little bit about that, what are the biggest challenges? How do you think we're progressing to address those?
Yeah, so we're involved in lots of mobility markets, and I'll just talk primarily mobility markets around the world. So certainly in the US, the biggest opportunity here is material handling, what Plug is doing.
You guys are one of our largest suppliers.
We thank you very much for the...
And they're both members. Yeah. They're both members. In good standing. In good standing.
And their compressor is very...
So we thanks for the great partnership. And in the US, really, it's driven by the material handling market. There are pockets of the market where we see bus transportation really starting to take off. California has a light-duty vehicle refueling station part of the marketplace, which has had its bumps and challenges, a little more bumps than successes, I would say, in the California hydrogen market, sort of a perfect storm, if you will, on the light-duty side. But as we look at different markets around the world, different markets and different regions are having success and identifying different opportunities for mobility. So if we go to Australia as an example, I'll start in Australia and work my way up. They're really looking at trash trucks, right? So these are very heavy pieces of equipment that are on the road that put a lot of pollution in highly densely populated areas, and removing those trash trucks from the road bring a huge opportunity to decarbonize a kind of a niche but a very high polluting sector in that particular market. Early on in their exploration phase, they were talking about heavy duty transportation, long hauls across the country. And some of the challenges are to put those refueling points, to get green molecules at all of these refueling points. Some of the early market challenges are a little more, so to speak, challenging, right? So where you have a return to base opportunity, the trash truck goes along its route, it may drive 200 miles a day, it's very heavy and it needs quick refueling, it could go and come to a particular point in time. As we work our way up towards Japan, Japan has really bought in totally to the whole hydrogen society. They use residential solid oxide fuel cells using kind of an internal process with natural gas in residential applications. They're very committed to the light duty refueling market. They have about 160-ish large-scale refueling stations to support consumer vehicles, the Mirai and now the Crown, and soon to come out the Toyota Corolla. But we are supporting the Japanese government, METI and Toyota Motors, in putting smaller stations outside of Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, Hiroshima, Okayama, some of these large areas that can also provide energy resiliency, where Japan, being an island, really has no natural resources of their own, so that these areas, specifically where the earthquake was 2 weeks ago, we have 2 refueling stations. One of them actually happened almost directly underneath the refueling station, and it's built for safety, right? So nothing happened, there wasn't big explosion, there wasn't a hydrogen release, and they were able to continue to fuel vehicles when other parts of their power were down. China, from we call it the medium, heavy duty-ish market for trucks and final mile delivery, is, I think they have 3 times what buses and trucks than the rest of the world combined have sitting on the road. And they've made a full commitment to electrifying fleets. So electrifying fleets in, say, Guangzhou, where it's warm, you could use electric buses because you don't have any degradation of range. But in a place like Beijing and Xi'an and some of these other areas where you have cold weather and electricity degradation, hydrogen provides you perfect same performance for a full fill on the trucks. In India, we're exploring with partners in India pathways that don't necessarily go in the early market on the electrification end, but there are government programs that are encouraging the use of a high-thane mix, right? So between 0 and 18% mix of hydrogen with CNG that does not change the user experience, right? So users are very well versed in how to fill CNG stations. Those stations probably won't be changed for quite some time. But when you can have a higher percentage of hydrogen CNG mix, then you can start to introduce the reduction of NOx and CO2 in a hydrogen and natural gas blend, and that will start to encourage other parts of the mobility market. That'll take a little more time to come into play. I could talk for 3 hours on this, so I'd be just to give pieces of highlights here.
No, that's great. And I think because we got so many questions during lunch about how do I fill the vehicle, we actually have one of your units here in DC. And again, for small scale, Honda and others originally tried to have like home fueling as well. Obviously, it's really expensive, but smaller kind of community scale. That's one strategy. And also just touching on Japan, which had 400,000 stationary fuel cells for residential applications since Fukushima. And then with the vehicles, that power offtake approach. So for example, the Toyota Mirai, where if there is a disaster, you could actually use the vehicle itself that would power the house for 5 days. And we also have a H2 rescue, it's called truck demo project we're working on with DOD and FEMA that could go to a disaster site, provide power, heat, and then even water. So again, lots of innovative, again, a lot of people just are not as familiar, so I think it's great to have more visibility. And then I also had questions specifically during lunch on the task force, which we'll hear from Nolty on, since there's a lot of interest in how do we actually get engaged. So it's a huge, huge opportunity. So President Biden, Prime Minister Modi, hydrogen is many, there are many, but obviously, hydrogen is our focus here. And major companies, Cummins, Tata, there's a task force where industry will get engaged. So I thought, Nolty, maybe you can say a little bit more about the task force. How can folks here, if they're interested, get engaged?
Sure, Sunita. So the U.S.-India Hydrogen Task Force was launched. It came out of the Strategic Clean Energy Partnership with the U.S. Department of Energy and the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy back in 2021, and we're very excited. The focus of the task force is to find opportunities to scale up hydrogen technology and production in India and create opportunities for greater collaboration between industry and government. There's going to be 5 working groups under the task force, one focused on hydrogen production, industrial applications, a lot of interest in the steel sector in India, of course, and mobility will be another area of focus, everything from maritime applications to long-haul trucking and other areas. Then we'll focus on renewable energy storage will be another subcommittee, and then last but not least, there will be hydrogen financing will be a focus of one of the working groups. That'll focus on kind of what Frank touched on earlier, creating innovative financial models, business models, ways to de-risk some of the projects in India. So we're really excited about the opportunities there. And there'll also be another committee focused on safety and standards that we'll be working on. And we have around 50 companies so far, some of the biggest players in the sector. Plug Power, of course, has been very active in the task force since its start, and look forward to recruiting more companies to participate, both from the Indian industry and from U.S. industry.
Great. So I think hopefully any of you are interested, you can follow up there. I have one question from the audience I'll read now, and it is, how can different partners, just getting a phone call. How can different private players contribute to hydrogen growth? Maybe we'll start with Sanjay.
Private player as in
Yes,
private
private.
investors, or just to make sure?
I'm guessing, yeah, maybe I can ask how many here would be interested in offtake?
Yeah.
So how many potential producers?
Producers.
Either.
Okay.
Oh, producers, so, okay. So it looks like we have more investors, so. Oh, so the demand, so the use of the hydrogen.
Somebody
so
buying
if
it
you need
from
the
you.
hydrogen for like refining, ammonia production, transportation, heavy-duty truck fleet, forklifts, stationary power, like, or energy storage, if you're building out renewables and you want to. So that's what I mean by offtake, the actual use of the hydrogen, as opposed to the production of the hydrogen. So you'd be interested in the offtake. Yeah, so I think basically the question, you can read it open-ended, so different private players contribute to hydrogen growth. Again, this is a nascent industry, we talked about huge potential. Think of, solar, wind, some of these fields, or even AI, decade ago. So lots of growth and opportunity. So I think the question is, how would they get engaged? How can they contribute to the growth?
Yeah, a couple of things, I think, right? So when you really think about the biggest bottleneck for the growth of the hydrogen industry, I think it comes down to really creating a lot of innovative financing solution. I think it's no longer really a technology challenge. right? I mean, of course, there needs to be continued improvement. There needs to be continued work on that front, right? So, but I think that's an area where, I think when you think about today, right? So if somebody were to go do a project, when they fund that entire project on their balance sheet, you have $1 that gets you a certain project built. But when the financing continues to evolve and the cost continues to go down, that same dollar will allow you to build 10 times more project because of the cost reduction, and also because of, instead of having to build a project with entire equity capital in your balance sheet of $1, you might only need to use 20 cents of that. So you get a 5 times multiplier on that, and you get another 4 to 5 times multiplier driven by the cost reduction, right? So thinking through, going to your financial institution and maybe looking for some kind of a high yield bond that is related to green hydrogen, right? That actually could be something very creative in terms of how financing might open up in terms of cost of capital, driving the cost of that capital down. And I think it's, broadly speaking, Sunita, in my opinion, it's really the awareness, right? And making sure that everybody recognizes the benefit of the hydrogen rather than a lot of noise that tends to be in the market sometimes. That's another area where I think everybody can actually contribute quite a bit. Those are the first two things that comes to my mind. Frank, you probably have other things.
Let me take this a little bit differently. I think that while there's a high-level sense of corporate business and finance, there's also sort of a community level of this, and I think part of the effort in every country, whether it's a highly developed or undeveloped country, is asking the questions of, if hydrogen is useful, where you can identify places where there's liquid fossil fuels being used, or where electricity itself is not really able to help decarbonize. If you ask questions about any particular industry, whether it's transportation, whether it's ammonia, fertilizer production, you begin to start to get the ideas that business people and technology people can relate to by thinking, well, if there's an entire bus fleet that is diesel driven, what if there was a hydrogen production capability? Where would I get the buses from? So sometimes from some of the very organic places of just curiosity, the best ideas just emerge, and then you get to the high finance, and you get to the areas and the barriers.
Absolutely.
So some things are just right in front of us.
Yeah.
And just to build on that, we're working very closely with a lot of the state governments and a lot of the local stakeholders to educate them about hydrogen, and also to build demonstration projects, pilot projects with our companies, and make sure that we really educate all the stakeholders and give them all a comfort level in the process.
Great. So we have less than a minute left, and I thought I'd end with one really quick lightning round question. So we have national strategy now. So 50 million metric tons by 2050. We've already seen so much growth in such a short time. Public announcements, over 12.5 million tons of clean hydrogen production. Again, private already announced. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being 100% probability that we're going to achieve our national strategy of 50 million, what number do you say we would be at? Again, your guess, and we can come back in 2050.
Well, Sunita, I don't want to make this political, but right now our ability to make hydrogen in the United States is going to be heavily dependent on the way the U.S. Treasury finalizes guidance that's being adjusted, and I want to be entirely optimistic that we'll achieve 10 million metric tons by 2030 and 20 million metric tons by 2040, and whatever the goals are. But the ability to get the ecosystems moving and get scale is going to require flexibility and versatility that currently may have some constraints.
So it sounds like you're 50-50. You're not going to give a number?
64, I'd say 5 million metric tons.
Okay.
Sounds like a good number.
Okay. Sanjay?
Again, I think I'll echo what Frank has said about needing the support from a policy standpoint, and I'm actually going to take a slightly different view. I'm hopeful that we'll get the support that's needed because it's the right thing to do. Hydrogen has so many benefits in terms of what it brings to the table, so I'm actually going to go with 9 out of 10.
Great, okay.
I will put it at an 8 out of 10. Looking at hydrogen subsidy systems around the globe, what we have seen, and I think Treasury will see the light in that a lot of projects have not reached final investment decision. And I think these facts will enlighten Treasury to make it as least restrictive as possible. So I give it an 8 out of 10.
Great. And by the way, February 26th is the deadline. So the notice of proposed rulemaking is open. Again, hydrogen.energy.gov is one good website to go to. And so, to your point, feel free if people have comments. And then lastly,
comment.
Nolty.
Well, I
That's
know
where you can help.
after the IRA, we had a lot of our big Indian member companies looking at investments in the U.S. And as you just mentioned, a lot of them haven't made the FID decision yet, but we're really bullish. We think that both governments will put the right policies in place. And I'd give it an 8 as well.
Great. So please join me in giving a round of applause to the panelists right on top here.
Sunita, one closing comment for
Okay.
everybody.
Great.
IIT is made up of entrepreneurs, technologists, investors, innovators. Hydrogen was really made for that composition of talent. Go out and do good in India, do good in the U.S., and you can join our association when your companies grow.
That's great.
Well said.
And,